So I'll go ahead and start with the introduction, kind of why we started this and what it is. Last month we did the Microsoft Teams webinar. It's really got a great showing and some great feedback. We're continuing on with, this month we're doing a SharePoint part 2. Part 1 is really going to have a ton of really good information today, but if you want to dive even deeper, we're going to have part 2 next week, next Wednesday. So if you get a lot out of today and you're like, well, I also want to learn more about applications within SharePoint or whatever it is, we'll send the agenda out. So if you're interested, you can register for that one as well. So the idea of this came about by 3 IT service providers, All Tech Services, Globalquest, and Data Magic Inc. We thought the idea of we're constantly recommending these things to our clients, such as Microsoft 365, but then it's also our duty to make sure we train our customers and the community on how to use these tools. And of course, this is a completely free series. It's just to provide additional value and education. So I'm going to go ahead and let Shane and Mike introduce themselves and kind of why they think this is an important webinar to go over. And then after that, I'll introduce our presenter today.
Yes, my name's Shane Kimbrell with Data Magic, and thank you for everyone that joined that we had sent out there. We have done this in the past. What did we do this like 2 years ago, Taher?
Yeah, it's
got really good.
Yeah,
we got really good response from it, and I feel like it could turn into a real powerful tool for our business and then educating all of our end users out there. So we really look forward to it, and hopefully we can add some value.
Thanks, Shane.
Hey, Mike, you there?
Yeah, I'm here, buddy. I'd like to thank everybody for joining too, and Taher and Sarah for getting this all ready for us. We've gotten a lot of questions from clients lately about using these types of tools during COVID, working from home. We're trying to get that education out there to use these tools and make business still work, whether you're in the office or you're working from home or you're on vacation. So I think it's a great series, and I'm looking forward to our series next year also.
Absolutely. And the days of the on-premise server, I don't want to say are going away, but for a lot of smaller, even medium-sized businesses where they don't have a lot of need for those on-premise servers, this series is going to give you an idea of what it looks like to be basically completely cloud-based, and SharePoint is a key part of that. So we got Sarah here. She has decades of experience with SharePoint, back to where it's only on premise to where it is today, how it's evolved, and she's been there every step of the way. So after a few interviews and seeing her resume and the reviews of other projects she's done and presentations, we knew she was the perfect fit for this presentation. So Sarah, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, and of course everyone watching, there's going to be a Q&A section at the end, so make sure you're writing those questions down. You can put them in the chat before we get to the Q&A section, or you can save it for the Q&A section. So Sarah, I'm going to pass it to you if you want to go ahead and give an intro. And
great, yeah, just 1 second. Of course, the minute I say that, I went to hit on my there you go. Thank you for that introduction. I'm a Microsoft Certified Systems Administrator. I've specifically been working with SharePoint since my career began. My first IT job, my new manager said, QA has requested us to install this WSS. Can you take a look at it and get it installed and working? So I did a little research and I did the install and I handed it over. And then I pretty much forgot about it. About a month later, one of our help desk people came running in and going, SharePoint's down. And we all kind of looked at him, didn't honestly know what he was talking about at first. And I said, oh, I know what you're talking about. Is anybody trying to use it? And he said, everybody's using it. So it turns out that a bunch of the department heads had gotten together and had a meeting and seen what QA was doing and decided they wanted their own web environment too. And SharePoint had just pretty much become a business critical application overnight. So that's kind of how I got my start. WSS was one of the first versions of SharePoint. They also called it SharePoint 2003. Now with SharePoint 2019, SharePoint Online, Microsoft really has come a really long way. And it is still, as much as we've gotten more out of functionality, searchability, but it's still a software that, if deployed in the right environment, can be immensely profitable in a short period of time, because users will discover and dive into the functionality it provides. So let's get into that. Today, we're going to cover the basics of SharePoint functionality as a document storage solution. SharePoint is a far better option, as we are talking about, than traditional file servers for most organizations. Utilizing SharePoint can solve many problems within an organization, such as document retention, duplication, offsite and simultaneous access, versioning, external user sharing, and as I said there, much more that we will get into eventually, like we were talking about in that second webinar we're going to do. Sites take away the complicated file structures and make permissioning much easier. So let's get started talking about that. SharePoint is, in its most basic form, a collection of lists. SharePoint Online provides an easy-to-use interface, options for access, mobile access, powerful search, administration centers. Also, a lot of the functionality that you're going to get out of the box is still going to be enough for most companies just as is. It can be easily customized for many uses, but we're going to start out and talk about how SharePoint works for document storage and for a file server. As he was saying, it really is great as a replacement and getting everybody up on the cloud and working well. So documents in SharePoint are stored in document libraries. They're like super folders. They allow co-authoring, offline syncing, versioning, custom views, metadata tracking, permissioning. We're going to talk about all of those things. File servers are often forced to adhere to department-based folder structures and permissions, where SharePoint makes collaboration much easier. Users can be empowered with permissioning rights. That saves IT from needing to make every small change. And permissioning options can be easily managed by IT through the admin console. New employees can be added to groups or teams and automatically have access to all the files or folders necessary. We are going to start out talking about co-authoring. I think this is one of the things that is the most powerful in SharePoint as a file server option. Co-authoring allows more than one person to work on a document at a time. Changes are automatically saved back to the document as users work on it. You can also customize your document library by requiring a document to be checked out before editing it if you don't want to allow co-authoring. So there are some reasons when co-authoring might not be ideal, and you can decide that on a document library basis. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing with SharePoint, which I think is a really important thing to remember. Offline sync is another one that I think people like to use a lot. It's available so your users can work on files without network access. They can sync from any document library to their computer, their tablet, their mobile device, and as soon as their network connection is restored, the application will automatically push any changes made to the document, allowing the most up-to-date version to be available for everyone. We're next going to talk about versioning, and versioning is really important. I tried to kind of give you guys a view of this on here, so I'm going to walk you through it, but it's just a little slice of what you can really do there. Versioning is an extremely helpful feature. If you're working in any kind of environment that needs to keep detailed versioning info, SharePoint does it for you. Even if you don't work in that kind of an environment, versioning allows you to keep better track of your documents and many other things as well. For example, you can look at previous versions to see who made particular changes to a document. You can restore a previous version when needed. And if you've ever had somebody say, oh no, I think I overwrote that, then you know how important and useful this can be. And as you can kind of see from the slide here, this is a snapshot of what some of the ways you can customize versioning, and just turn that on and forget about it, because it will do all the work for you until you need it, which I think is really, really important to a lot of businesses. Next, we're going to talk about metadata and custom views, actually. And I have a really great slide on this one. So let's see. Oh, it skipped over it. Come on, little slide. There we go. I'm having a little problem there. Metadata and custom views really go hand in hand. Document libraries already automatically record default metadata, such as, who created it, what the time was, things like that. But when you can also create custom metadata that's specific to your organization, that becomes a really powerful tool. Maybe customer name or department name, types of documents, location, anything you can really think of. And it allows you to easily search on any of these metadata, as well as create custom views. So as an example, imagine you have a document library with custom metadata for location, department, year, and client. Some of your users may prefer to view documents by the year they were created. That's kind of what you're seeing here, is if I wanted to create a view just for me based on the year they were created. Others may want to view the first by department and then further sort by year. Each user can create their own view. They get to make it public or private. And when they log in, they will see the documents in whatever way works best for them, which is really what we're going for as far as functionality goes. Now, the next thing is the recycle bin, and this is one of my favorites because I can actually say, I feel pretty confident saying you can never lose a document again. The recycle bin is built into SharePoint, and anything that it accidentally goes into that recycle bin stays there along with all its attached metadata. So that means if you or your users accidentally delete a file, it can be restored by just clicking on the recycle bin and hitting the button to restore just the file. It becomes really powerful to people because even if they accidentally would delete it a second time, it goes into an administrator recycle bin. So it becomes really hard to actually delete a file accidentally. You pretty much have to know you're doing it. So that's a great thing. The ability to customize so much inside these libraries is one of its greatest strengths. And we've discussed customizing metadata and views, but you can also customize alerts and even content. And the alerting feature really is one of my favorites. I feel like I say that all the time, but we talked about how getting excited about SharePoint, and I really do get excited about this stuff. The alerting feature allows for anyone to create alerts customized for their needs. They can choose if the alerts go to email or a phone. They can choose to alert on an entire library down to even a single item. They can choose just to get alerted on items they create or get alerted on all changes. They can customize if they want to get one email at the end of the day as a report with all the alerts, or if they want an alert as soon as a change is made. So as you can see here, there's tons of ways to customize this. I love that you can even choose for it to send you a text message. So that means even people who are on the go or working from home and kind of, all over the place have that option. And I think it's super, super important. Let's see here. Permissioning. This is a really big one, and it's one that people kind of get confused about sometimes, so I really like to go over it. Permissioning can be configured and customized at all levels. So that means from a whole document library to a folder to a single document. You can choose to allow sharing to outside users, which allows you to give a link to your customers and vendors so they can either read or contribute to a document, a folder, or a library as needed. I want to say, because I literally was talking to a customer about this yesterday, when you're choosing to give access to share things, especially with outside customers, you can do that at the site level. You can say on this site we can share things and on this one we aren't. So it isn't an all or nothing approach for all of your SharePoint environment, because most people's SharePoint environments are made up of multiple sites. Of course, SharePoint document libraries hold items created in any Microsoft application, but you can also customize your document library to hold links to outside content, specialty document types. It means it's easy to keep all your related content of any type together for ease of use. And that's really what we're going for here is ease of use. So how do you access items stored in a SharePoint document library? Well, that is a really important one to discuss, and there's a lot of information about it. The best one, in my opinion, to use, there's really two of them. The top one is OneDrive Sync. That's going to be your best option if you're using it as a file server. OneDrive was built on top of the SharePoint platform. So OneDrive is more for items that would typically have been saved on a hard drive or like a personal folder. Think of it as things that you can share, but it's not really a great idea to share it on a large scale. You're going to want to pretty much keep it on a small scale. So you need to know if somebody leaves your environment and they have a bunch of items on OneDrive, when their account goes away, those items go away too. So that's kind of the difference between SharePoint and OneDrive. SharePoint obviously is going to leave those items active, any items that are on there, even if the person who created them goes away or leaves the company. So think of OneDrive more as the hard drive of your computer, and then SharePoint like the shared drive. OneDrive Sync, however, can be used for OneDrive or SharePoint. It allows you to choose which documents and document libraries you want to sync and access those whether you're online or offline. The second option is Map Drive, and this is kind of another way that some people who are really concentrating on using SharePoint as a file server use. It's not the best one. We always prefer OneDrive Sync. But many companies that are used to having map drives to their file server prefer to map to a SharePoint document library. And the positive part of that is where in the past, most map drives required a VPN connection. So anytime you logged in outside the office, that drive would fail until you had your VPN connected. With SharePoint Online, you don't need the VPN connection. So you're not going to have that dropped drive. The downside is that it doesn't allow for offline file access like OneDrive Sync does, and it's just not quite as supported by Microsoft, so sometimes there can be issues with doing it that way. There are companies that prefer it. I work with them. If that's that's their preference due to familiarity, I say go for it. The third way is to use the SharePoint. Yes?
Sarah, do you mind if I provide a quick example real quick?
Yeah, please do.
Like how we use, so we used to we used to have where it's like G Drive and we click on it and have to, you'd have to be in the office, you'd have to VPN or whatever. So now I have my little Surface Book that I'm going to meetings and I'm writing things down in the SharePoint. And then when I get back to the office, it's right where I needed it. So I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Right, yeah.
So, this is the right screen, okay. So that's my son and niece. They like to go skydiving. But when you click into your folder structure, like here's all our different SharePoint, or not. These are some of them. I have some of the most important ones synced, and I'm not a part of like the tech ones, for instance. So I can, from anywhere on my phone, like I use it on my phone all the time. I use my tablet. I use it here when I'm in the office. I can just click on these, boil down, make changes, make changes with someone else. Like Tim Higgins in our office here is always like, hey, I have a client network review done, so we'll both jump in together. We'll do a Teams call. We'll make 8 edits at the same time. So it's just more efficient that way, and it just keeps things the continuity there. So that's just a specific example of how we have it set up, and works really well for our specific workflow. So anyway, sorry, Sarah, I just wanted to provide a specific example.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's very interesting to me. It's one of the things that I really love to do as I'm working with clients and customers on these kind of things, is that everybody kind of uses different connections in different ways because of the fact that it makes it so customizable for how they work. You just need to have somebody who can kind of build out the environment in a way that is going to work best for your users. And like you're showing right there, you definitely have that. It's very helpful. The third way to access it is through the SharePoint web portal itself, and that's going to give you the most functionality and customization. So when I am talking about a lot of these things like configuring alerts, configuring metadata, all of those things that you can do, you're going to need to go actually to the SharePoint web portal to do that. And it's basically just letting you, you're going to use Office Online within SharePoint, or you can open documents and things from straight to your computer's actual installation of the Office applications. So you have some options there as well, but when you're working within the SharePoint web portal itself, you're going to see a lot more functionality. You're going to have full SharePoint out of the box functions instead of just straight file server functions. So that's why I always try to include that. Some companies barely ever actually go to their SharePoint site. They're just using it as a file server, and that's a perfectly fine option. So typical concerns. Concerns around SharePoint are usually cost, IT needs, end user adjustment, adoption, adaptation. Like I was saying, most of these are usually misconceptions at this point. I understand where it can, people can get nervous. The truth is that where we are right now, most of this is going to be outweighed, and I can kind of show you how that works. As far as IT concerns go, they're very minimal. SharePoint has become such a business critical application that it's easy to find someone who has the expertise to do further customization or give support if that's what you need. But it's also true that most of the time, if you have an IT person who is giving support, they can take care of any day-to-day things that need to happen in SharePoint. It's also possible just to have a power user who gets trained to do those day-to-day tasks, and that happens in a lot of companies. The administration is set up much like the rest of Microsoft 365, and so with minimal help and minimal training, often it can be handled easily by the same person supporting your other Active Directory installations, and that's usually what ends up happening. For larger installations, that's when somebody like me, an actual SharePoint administrator, gets hired. But for the smaller ones, a lot of times it's mostly power users who are taking care of it. And out of the box, SharePoint security is already top notch. I started out my career in pharma and then moved on to the university environment, and both areas were places where there was a lot of personal information, and we never really had to configure a lot more security than straight out of the box for any of our items to still be as safe as they needed to be for compliance reasons. The fear of anybody getting to cloud data is almost eradicated at this point. We kind of talked about that a little bit before we got started. The concern a lot of people have is that someone will share something specifically that they shouldn't, and SharePoint, like I mentioned earlier on, has wonderful options for creating permissions that are specifically built to keep that from happening. Also, Microsoft 365 provides a slew of new features. Honestly, they're coming out with them so fast, sometimes I can't even keep up with them. I regularly will have a customer come to me and say, hey, I want to look at doing this security feature on SharePoint, and I have to go, okay, give me a little bit of time to look into that, because there's always something new coming out, and I think that's really a strong point too. It's something that is really helping people feel comfortable about SharePoint security in the long run. So SharePoint's ever evolving, just talking about that, options and functionality wise. Developers can build out SharePoint pages and apps specifically customized for your business. I am not a SharePoint developer. I am actually just administrator. So when people come to me and they want coding done, I don't do that at all. And that's a really strong point for me to share, because I want you to know that you don't ever have to code to do a lot with SharePoint. Out of the box, it's amazing. There are also a lot of apps available for purchase that make it even easier for an end user or an administrator to create forms or workflows, those kind of things in SharePoint. But really, the out-of-the-box functionality is pretty great. When I say that, this is where my opinion SharePoint can get very, very exciting. Microsoft has empowered our users with Flow. And for those of you who've used it, you already know. For those of you who haven't, it's really a way to kind of design an app specifically to do what you want it to do without coding at all. And it's really, really fun. But with out-of-the-box functionality and some basic training, businesses can create applications housed on SharePoint that can do almost anything. I have a list in my notes of things that I help do: service requests, scheduling, project management applications, calendar tracking, sharing, forms, surveys, submissions. I even actually replaced, when I worked at one of the universities, they had a system for their board of trustees so that they could share items, since they lived all across the country. And the system was costing them $80,000 a year, and I replaced it with a SharePoint system that I built with out-of-the-box functionality. So that kind of stuff is where it gets really exciting, but that's kind of for our next webinar. We'll get more into some of those kind of things. So this has really been a high-level overview. I think the idea here was to give you a better idea of what SharePoint can do for your organization, but we are going to be happy to answer any questions if you have specific concerns or thoughts on things that you were trying to do. So I'll hand it back over to Tahir to deal with that.
To deal with it.
Yeah. You can take care of all the questioning. No.
Yeah. Sarah, I just want to say, I think that was perfect in that's exactly what we wanted to get through on part one.
Great.
What is the easiest way to implement SharePoint, and that's typically file structure, some of these built-in apps. For instance, one of the things we're doing is we have a vacation calendar, right? So through SharePoint, someone can request vacation and automatically request to the supervisor, and we say approve, deny, and then it tracks the PTO. That was a thing that was so manual before, and it was such a pain that now it's automated through SharePoint. So just like little things like that.
So much paperwork that ends up going away, which is, the goal.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for covering that. And then part two, like Sarah mentioned, I'll let her elaborate more here in a few minutes on what part two is going to go into. But before I do that, I just wanted to pass over to Shane or Mike to talk a little bit about why. So if all of the data is in the cloud, I know Sarah mentioned it is very secure nowadays, and there is a lot of redundancy in versioning. But why would a business also consider a Office 365 backup? So you have all of your information in SharePoint. Why would you consider a backup?
Who's taking this one, me or you, Shane?
Well, I feel like with all of the crypto viruses and different things that come along, that you definitely need to have a backup system, especially the ones that are using those map drives that map directly over to it. Because when you do get a crypto virus, it's going to attack those drives first. And then if you do have a user that's trying to hide information, there is ways of permanently deleting files that are in the system. So if you come across that, I definitely think that it would be worth the small amount to back it up. The systems that are out there that back up, not only back up the SharePoint, but it's backing up the email, the contacts, calendar, all of those things that go along with Office 365. Even the OneDrive is backed up as well. So for the small investment that it takes to back those things up, and the more dependent that we're becoming on these products, it's nice to have it backed up by someone other than Microsoft.
Yeah,
that's the main thing. So,
And it's a lot easier to get at your backup information if you have your own. Like you're saying, when it's backed up with Microsoft, getting to it can be a little bit of a challenge. And when you have it right there for yourself, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Also, Shane and I and a couple of other colleagues were down at a conference down in Florida a couple of years ago. We had a security consultant there talking about a Microsoft hiccup where they were moving data across data centers, and they lost about 4 tenant spaces. They lost all the data. It was just a glitch in their system. The MSP was getting calls from multiple clients saying, hey, we can't access our SharePoint, can't access our email. They went into the client's 365 portal, and the tenant space was completely gone. So Microsoft lost everything, so they were able to recover using some of the products that we sell, recover all their email, their calendars, their SharePoint instances, and their OneDrive within a couple of hours without bringing downtime to the business. So backup's always important. There's humans in the back end. Humans make mistakes. So we got to protect our investment. Our investment's people and data.
Yeah, those are fantastic answers. One of the questions we had is how much does it cost? Well, I think we all may use a different product. I feel like as managed service providers, part of our job, not only of course provide end user support and strategic consulting, it's also managing the vendors, right? Because there's a different vendor, the different provider for everything that we do. It's almost like we are the central port to manage all of these different things, right? So in our situation, we use a tool called Dropsuite. We love Dropsuite, and it's only $3 a user, right? So if you have 20 users, you have 50 users times 3, and that's all of your data, like Shane mentioned, not just SharePoint, email, Teams, everything backed up. So great answers there. The other thing, we talked about security, and Sarah mentioned that security is so strong, and an important piece of security is the multi-factor authentication. I think everyone that is viewing this webinar right now has probably heard of multi-factor authentication and why it's so important. Shane or Mike, either one of y'all can take this. Why do you think multi-factor authentication is so important, especially in a SharePoint type environment?
Well, I mean, multi-factor is important with any application that you have out there, but especially Office 365. These attacks that are coming across now, people will hack in and trick you. They're very tricky on sending emails out saying reset your password, and as soon as you do that, then you're giving them your full information online, and they can log into your email account and pose as the president of the organization or CFO and send out request changes for for transfer deposits. We've had it. Someone thought that one of their employees was buying a vehicle at a CarMax, and it ended up that it was all illegitimate. And luckily, the bank caught that one. The banks are getting better at it, but definitely don't rely on the banks to handle it. But that's where we've seen the biggest damage is these links changes for direct deposits or doing transfers of money online. So I would definitely put that in there, and pretty much anything like your banking, anything that you can do with multi-factor would be great. We use a product called Duo that links together multiple applications with what they call single sign-on technology. And I think this would be definitely something to look at for the future.
You covered it all, buddy. I have nothing to add.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there for sure. One thing I will say is multi-factor authentication is free, but some people perceive it as inconvenient, which I understand. But the reality is Office 365 specifically makes it very easy. As once you log into a computer, you're good for, it could be like 30 days, depending on the setting. It's only when you're in a new computer or a new location that they're like, hey, can you please re-authenticate with a second form of authentication, which is usually a text to the cell phone. But here's the easy part. With Office 365, there is an app called the Authenticator app. I love this thing, where when you log in, instead of having to look at a code and then type the code in and click enter, it just sends you a push notification to your phone and says, do you approve or deny? You just click approve. So it's literally half a second more work, but the security is 99% better. So just something to consider there. We use the Authenticator app. We recommend the Authenticator app. There's actually a blog I can send out that goes into how to do it. It's like, a 2-minute process to get the Authenticator app. So those are the main questions I wanted to ask there. Before we get into the questions from our attendees here, because we've got plenty of time, so if we have plenty of questions or even just a few, we'll have plenty of time for that. Sarah, if you want to provide a brief introduction into part 2 and what is, how we're going to go a little deeper and what we're going to be talking about next week.
Sure, yeah. So I think that one of what we were doing today was really discussing how to use SharePoint just as a file server, what it can do for your files. What we get into next time is more of how each of the applications, all the other things that it can do. We're going to bring in and talk about surveys. We're going to talk about how you can do custom lists. And a custom list you can basically make into any application you want. So when you were talking about your PTO system, or as I was talking about doing surveys and things like that, that's just being able to take a list and customize it directly for your needs. And then you can kind of put those things together and to create an app out of them. So when I talked about replacing the board application that they were paying so much money for, it was a combination of document libraries, custom lists, approval processes, areas where your team can collaborate for the different departments. And so you can really put all of those things kind of together to create apps. And that's kind of what we're going to get into, what that functionality is and how you do that with out-of-the-box functionality, or can customize it a little more if you want to.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So this one's going to be a little bit more, I don't want to say technical, but it's going to be, you're probably not going to be the one implementing these things, right? So this would be, unless there are some IT directors here that would, y'all should definitely attend because you may be the one implementing it. But for those managers and owners on the call, this is going to be good to know the opportunity, what is available through SharePoint, so you can tell your, Globalquest, Data Magic, All-Tech on what you want to accomplish. So it's more of informing you of the what you can do rather than this is how you do it.
Right. And I think I do talk about during that SharePoint does kind of empower the users, that if you are a power user, there's going to be a lot you can customize yourself. But like you said, when we get into building those apps to kind of put them together, you can kind of know what to take up to your administrator or your IT person and let them kind of put together an app of some sort.
Perfect. So I'm going to see, I think we got a few questions here. And if anyone has any questions, please add them into the chat bar here. I'm going to start going. The first question we have is, are you using an 80s mouse, Sarah?
I know. Tell me about it. This new computer is so wonderful in so many ways, but I definitely have some learning to do.
Great question, Mark. And Michelle Martin said, since you can share documents outside clients, could this be used in a medical office for patients to fill out their paperwork online? Would you have to create a SharePoint account?
I am actually creating exactly that for a medical business right now. They have a form that they've been sending out. They work with an older population, so they were having to have these people scan the form and send it back to them, and that was causing some problems. So yeah, we're recreating the form in SharePoint. They send out the link, and because they've allowed to that specific SharePoint subsite, they've allowed external access for everyone without authentication, so you don't have to create a account. You have a lot of options there. You can say they don't have to authenticate at all, and then anybody can fill them out. You can say that they just have to authenticate with a email address. So then you kind of have some kind of knowledge of who is using your system. Totally up to you, and you can do that at a sub-site level. So definitely.
Yeah, and we will gather sensitive information. We don't recommend email, right? So we'll send a OneDrive link to customers sometimes when we need to gather passwords and things like that, because that link is protected. It only gives access to this one person. They're able to edit that, and then we are, from a security perspective, have every layer. We make sure they have every layer in place. So it's a very secure way to gather that sensitive information. So that would work with the same with PHI, and it is Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive is considered HIPAA compliant from a security, the technical safeguards. So, Josh Berman, what does the additional backup cost? I mentioned ours is $3 a user.
That's about right. We
Okay.
use Backupify. Yeah, the
Okay.
Datto product is Backupify, and it's about the same.
Yep, heard a lot of good things about Backupify too. Got another one. Okay, Michelle liked that answer. I'm glad you like that answer, Michelle. So good job, Sarah. 90% of our documents, I do not want external users to be able to view, but we need to be able to share the other 10%. As a SharePoint administrator of 50 employees, I'd like to ensure that most of our documentation is not shared. What is the best strategy to ensure that users aren't accidentally or purposely sharing information that is meant to stay internal? Should I rely on some sort of dashboard or report?
So my answer to that kind of gets a little complicated, but I'll try to keep it simple. There are a few different ways to do it based on how your documentation is structured. My favorite is if it still makes sense for how your company works, is to, like I said before, have a sub-site that's specifically for anything that might be shared out. I think that's a great way to do it, and then on the top level site, you just turn off external sharing, but on that sub site, you turn it on, and then those are the only things that are going to be able to be shared from outside. There are other ways to do it as well. Specifically, there's ways of creating permission levels so that some people can share and some people can't on certain things. That gets a little more complicated, and you have to kind of figure out how the people can work around, like if you want them to be able to upload documents, but you don't want them to be able to share it and things like that. It gets a little trickier, but that is an option as well.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions we have. So since we have a little bit more time, I'm just going to take 3 minutes to explain some upcoming webinars, some ideas for 2021. So SharePoint Part 2 is next week. If you've attended this one and you like it, I'll send the invite out for SharePoint 2, and so will Shane and Mike. We also have Excel. So based on the customer survey we sent out, people really wanted to learn more about Excel. So we actually did a 3-part series for Excel. So if you're not interested in Excel, feel free to just decline my invite. But if you want to learn a little more, or if you have someone in your organization that you'd like to learn, you can forward it to them totally free. And the guy we have is fantastic. He has the entire lesson plan. It's going to be a worksheet type, so it's not just slideshows. You're actually going to be getting Excel with them. He's going to be showing you how to use it. So that's going to be really great coming up in December. So those are the two. And then next year we have plenty of webinars. One of the things we're thinking about doing is browsers, different types of browsers and how to use them, how to use Outlook. So if there are specific webinars that y'all would like to hear, please send any of us an email and we'll get it on the calendar. We're pretty open at this point. So I see that almost everyone that started with us has stayed on the webinar. Usually on webinars, you see like this sharp drop off of people. So this must have not been overly boring. So I'm glad that you stuck with us. I hope you got a little bit of value out of it. I think at this point, I just want to thank you all for coming. And Mike and Shane, is there anything you want to say before we conclude?
No. Sarah, I think you did a great job. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Tyler,
This is very good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Tyler, thanks for organizing.
Yeah.
And
No
if you guys missed the last seminar, it was on Teams, and so we'll post that back up on our website. Each one of our companies will have a webinar page for all the past webinars and all the future webinars. So we're excited to get this thing going.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah,
definitely.
so much.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It's been
Pleasure.
great. Well, we're going to go ahead and conclude, and hopefully we'll see you next week and definitely next month. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.